So they thought a huge tsunami was going to come and wipe out Hawaii. And so I was working at Liberty Baptist Church at the time and taught in the school. And they literally were coming over the intercoms at the school saying, pray for Pastor Chase. We literally thought we were going to be dead.
Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. This is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire, and I have today Chase Allen with me. We knew each other for a lot of years, had a mutual friend, Joe South. We went to the Newsboys concert together.
To be honest, I don't even remember. That would have had to have been right around closing in on 20 years ago.
When I really saw you, Chase, was every year for, how many years did you go to Youth Pastor Summit?
Oh, man.
In Orlando?
Quite a few. It didn't matter if I was living here in the Central Florida area or even when I was up in South Carolina doing some ministry for a few years. It's been 5, 6, or 7 years that I've probably been to Youth Pastor Summit. Yeah.
And I think about every year for at least 5 of those years, you would come up to me and say, hey, you're Doug Edwards, right? Hey, I'm Chase, and we do that once a year.
Right. Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, you're here. And I heard that you're coming to First Baptist Umatilla, which is where I'm attending church now. And both the pastor, Brooks, was in my student ministry.
Yeah, that's right.
And you would come visit our student ministry with Joe.
Right.
Just a lot of things happen here. In youth ministry now, 9 years, you say?
Yeah, getting ready to start the 10th. May will be the close of 9 years in ministry and student ministry, and then starting my 10th. Seems crazy. It doesn't even seem possible that I'm getting ready to start 10th year of student ministry.
Well, I tell you, the next 10 will go even quicker.
Yeah.
And so Taylor, your wife, is a pastor's daughter.
Yeah.
So she knew what she's getting into with you, except that being on the youth pastor side is a lot different than the pastor side.
Yeah.
Than the senior pastor side.
Correct.
Both are extreme in the pastor realm. People don't see it that way necessarily because I was always the youth pastor. It didn't matter if I was 103 years old.
Right.
Catch us up to date.
Sure. So what's really cool about that is we were just in Orlando this past weekend with our students for a thing called Lift Tour that we go down to every year. We took them to Wonderworks. So as we were coming around on iDrive, I had a van full of 10 or 12 students in there. I said, hey guys, look, you've got to pay attention because that hotel right there is where I came to know Christ. So for me, it was September 1st, 2001. I was at a conference called SunQuest, and I was down there. It was the first night session and just felt a strong conviction that I am a sinner and I don't know the Lord and I need to be saved. And so, I went forward, eyes full of tears, and confessed my sins, and I had a youth pastor there lead me to the Lord, and actually ended up getting baptized that same night right there in the pool. And so that was a pretty cool thing. Most people are baptized in a baptistry and places like that. So that's kind of how I came to know the Lord. So that was pretty cool.
Now, who took you to that event?
So at that time I was attending a church, Orange Avenue Church of Christ. And
yeah.
Right here, not too far from here, actually. What's so funny about that is I actually just had a part-time youth pastor named John Dotson. He was the guy, He was the guy that picked me up. And, I was probably your standard Lake County high school student. I loved sports, so I pursued that a whole lot, was a decent little baseball player, and that seemed like that was the most important thing in life. And so I played shortstop and pitched quite a bit. And so that's kind of the things that I pursued.
Both intense.
Yeah, very intense. Foreshadowing for what life would be like, right? So did that. There'd be spurts in my life where I was really close walking with Jesus, and then parts where I was like, man, I don't remember the last time I've even been to church, let alone read my Bible. And so that was kind of the cycle of life for me for a little while. And I remember I went off to college. I was on a baseball scholarship in a little place called Parkersburg, West Virginia, which no one's ever been to. And I just remember there was a night in my dorm where I just felt super convicted about where I was in my walk with Christ. And I just remember it was in the fall, it would have been of 2007, super convicted. And I just said, God, I know you, but I'm going to give you control of my life. I'm going to quit trying to kind of do this on my own. Very quickly began getting back into God's word, very quickly began attending local churches again and kind of growing in my walk with him. I thought that's kind of that was just going to be it. You know, I was going to school to be a physical therapist and things like that. So I thought that was kind of it. You know, I'm going to start walking with the Lord again and it's going to be good. Very quickly, that next fall, so the fall of 2008, I had began kind of serving a little bit at Orange Avenue Church of Christ, just be an extra body in the room so that we can control these teenagers, basically. Yeah. I remember there was a Wednesday night. I just felt super strong conviction that, look, like you're going to school and you're trying to accomplish all these other things. And it almost felt like as if the Lord was telling me, this is what you're supposed to be doing with your life. You're in this room of students, you're worshiping, you're pointing them towards me. You can do a lot of other things with your life, but this is what you're supposed to do. And so I think for me, it was, you know, knowing like I could probably do 25 different things with my life if that's what I wanted to do. But it was, do I do what I believe God's telling me to do, or do I pursue kind of what I want to do? I had that moment where it was like, man, all right, sorry, Mom and Dad, I'm dropping out of the school I'm in, and I'm going this completely different direction, and it makes no sense. But I feel like it's what God's telling me to do, so I have to do that. That was kind of the call to ministry.
How did your parents feel about that?
You know, to be completely 100% honest and raw, my mom loved it. She thought it was the greatest thing that had ever happened. You know, having been kind of that, almost like a prodigal a little bit in high school, to then see her son going into ministry was like the greatest joy of her life ever. My father, not so much. You know, my dad, I don't think at the time he really truly knew the Lord, for one. But for two, I think when you are looking at things from the world's perspective, your son's wanting to be a physical therapist. He's probably going to make upwards of $100,000 upon graduation and do this, that, and the other. And now you're telling me you want to go be a youth pastor and you're going to get paid peanuts and just hope you make it, basically, you know? He took that, you know, not very well. And so it was kind of a tough spot there for a little bit for us. But he eventually realized that this wasn't just a rash decision that I made, that I truly felt like this is what God was telling me to do. And it's good to have one parent a little bit tougher than the other in some of the situations, because it kind of solidifies your calling. As dads, we try to put labels on things. Right. Well, where's the security? Our thing is we provide. A lot of that's thrown out the window. I mean, there's some pastors, youth pastors, that make their own money and they don't take a salary, or they take a part-time salary, do a full-time work, and have some kind of income coming in somewhere else. Sure. And that's their calling. So from there... Yeah. So from there, I kind of decided that I needed to go to the Bible college route. You know, there's a lot of guys, especially, you know, I work in a Baptist church. So especially in the Baptist world, a lot of guys will just get, a 4-year degree from kind of wherever. Like I went to UCF and I got a history degree or science or whatever, and then they'll go and get their MDiv. I just really felt strongly that, man, like I want to just go to Bible college now. So I ended up graduating from a small college in Kissimmee called Florida Christian College. It's now Johnson University, Florida. So I got a 4-year degree from there, and it's in Bible, but with an emphasis in youth and family ministry. So I pursued that route. I wanted to get the education. I feel like that would help me get a foot in the door a little bit. Funny, I mean, really how kind of everything got started with ministry is I needed an internship before I could graduate. And I didn't have an issue necessarily with working in a local church. That's what I wanted to do. But I just had an issue with the way it was set up. And so I remember going to a professor and saying, man, like, why do I have to do an internship that's this long? Like I've already done one internship before and I just really didn't like the whole system. And so I was like, well, if I've got to do it to graduate, we got to do it. So I remember at that time, and I won't name names, but I had contacted several local youth pastors to do some internships. And, 1 or 2 guys just never responded, which I understand now. Life is busy when you're in the trenches of ministry. Yeah. A couple guys responded, but it was, hey, we would love for you to intern, but a couple of things you need to know. 1 is it's unpaid, and 2 is we've already got like 3 or 4 other interns. So you're just kind of one of many. And so I think for me, it was super frustrating in that at that point of my life, Taylor, who's now my wife, and I were pretty seriously dating. We weren't going to be getting married, the next month or anything, but it was progressing to a serious relationship. Didn't really want to go too far. Actually, my mom, she's like, hey, I've got this friend. He's a senior pastor in Orlando. We're great friends. Like, I'm sure he would love to at least have a conversation with you about interning. Awesome. Well, Orlando's close. We can make that happen, right? Yeah. So I called him, tell him everything. Hey, I need to do an internship, blah, blah, blah. Explain him my life. And he was like, well, man, that's really cool. I would love to have you. But the only thing is I'm in Orangeburg, South Carolina now. And so my first question was, well, where is that? So that was like a, whoa, okay, well, so I have an internship offer now, but I've got to go to South Carolina 6 hours away from home, for the summer at this point. Amazing summer, completely changed my life. I knew I was going into full-time ministry, but it was more of a, all right, I can't go back for my last year of college and work a regular job. Like I've got to be serving somewhere. Like even if I'm just a small group leader at a church in the Orlando area, like I had to be doing ministry. And so that kind of kickstarted everything for me. And so I came back. You had referenced earlier that my wife Taylor is a pastor's daughter. And so he was a pastor here at a local church. So when I came back from my internship, there was just some transitional things happening as far as guys on staff. They said, well, hey, how about you just come be, student pastor here? We know you've got a year of college. Come run Wednesday night, be here on the weekends for church and Sunday school and run events. And so I did that for a year. I drove, on average.
While going to college full time.
Yeah, I drove an average of, I think it was 200 to 250 miles a week, just back and forth from Kissimmee to Tavares, Florida, just constantly, and ran a student ministry, actually very successful student ministry, the Lord's doing, not mine. I don't know how that happened with, studying full time and doing the things I was doing, trying to graduate.
I don't, and I don't recommend that
Right.
unless there is something in you that says exactly what happened to you. I cannot not.
Right.
I have to. There's something in your spirit that said, there's not a question here. Now, if there's not a question to where you're going, I cannot not do this,
right,
then the answer is don't. But you were at that place to where you're going, I have to do this.
Well, what was really cool about that for me, Doug, is that it actually kind of provided a lot of really cool things for me. I mean, I would get done with class on a Wednesday afternoon around 1:30, and I mean, I'd already have everything ready. I'd jump in the car and I'd drive, and I'd get to Tavares. It takes about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, so I'd get there, a little later, and it allowed me the opportunity to get everything set up for the night. I had lots of time to prepare. My then girlfriend, my now wife Taylor, would come with dinner, and so we'd eat and we'd get to actually see each other a little bit more. So it kind of worked out cool that way.
She was already preparing for long-term ministry.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I'm telling you. So, and then we'd run Wednesday night and it would be great. And we did an open gym thing back then because we had a gym at our campus. And so we'd stay there till, 9:00 at night doing open gym, just playing dodgeball with kids and building relationships. It's funny. I mean, every night on the way back, then we only had the Starbucks and Target. So I'd have to stop at Target and I'd just get a venti Americano and sip it on the way back to Kissimmee. And, the Lord sustained for sure. And so thankful for that season. A lot of guys don't have a experience like that or a season like that. And it was unique. I think what you said, it's not for everybody. I mean, at that time, I was just working at a mall for my job, just waiting for one day to get to do full-time ministry. I would have served for anywhere for anyone. I would have done it for free if I had to, and just ate all the ramen I could eat.
Right. And that's a true ministry heart. And one reason that we do this podcast is because the true ministry heart is one that will destroy itself just out of pure passion and because you're so called. And the one thing that I want to do is to help people protect themselves. I'm ADD. I'm the guy you got to protect. You, on the other hand, are an organizer, which, number one, that's just not right. You see more guys like me that are more ADD. The passion is there. Okay, we're going to do the big event. How's it going to happen? I don't know. I got to find people that'll do it. Organization is not in my wheelhouse.
Sure.
And I always said, that's a joke. This is a joke, God, really. I mean, this is all about organization.
Yeah, I mean, as far as just organization and things like that, since we're on that thread, I mean, that's the thing that I continue to get in ministry, is when we have guest speakers or bands or rappers or whoever comes in, it's like, man, like, how are you this organized? Like when you say you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, like you're there, or when you say you're going to do something, you do it. Like we're not used to this. And I wasn't always that way. I think, it's probably always been a giftedness of mine, but I believe that, we can change when we want to and if we want to. And so for me, having been in a lot of different size student ministries, I mean, I've been the youth pastor of a student ministry of 20 kids and never saw it grow, physically numbers wise.
Right.
And now being a student pastor of a fairly large student ministry, I think somewhere along the line, I just decided, hey, if I'm going to be able to pastor and run a student ministry of more than 50 or 60 students, I've got to become administrative. I've got to be, organized. And so it's definitely helped.
Yes, and my brother-in-law was one of my volunteers for many, many years, middle school ministry. And Scott is not 5'5" like I am. He's like 6'5".
Oh, wow.
So and I attracted tall guys. God knew I needed bodyguards. Scott's kids are in your youth ministry.
Oh, okay.
And so he said, Doug, when he said he'd be back at a certain time, he was back. And Scott's a pretty organized guy himself, and so is his wife. And so so that was the first clue that I had that you were that guy.
Sure.
I mean, Ann South was one of my organizers for middle school.
There you go.
Dottie Freeman was my major organizer for many, many years. Dottie was in her 80s when she finished organizing for me. I mean, she's amazing. But Ann, Joe's mom, Ann South, you know how organized she is.
Sure, absolutely.
And so I only had her for a few years, and it's like,
right.
You're really not going to do this anymore? But anyway, but I'd have 5 people like that just because you can't. And let me tell you what, here I'm an unorganized guy. So let me tell you the great hope for you, by the way, and organized guys like you. By the end of my ministry, some would doubt this, but we were running 70 in middle school, 70 in high school at the peak.
Right.
This was over a period, and I was going, where are they coming from? How did this happen?
Yeah,
because I'm not an organizer. I knew how to get 300, 400, 500, 700 people at a slot at events, but to keep them, sustain them. So it was those organized people around me, and it really was organization. When they got that regular calendar, they got that this event's happening this way, that they got the schedule for the retreat that we're going on. You're naturally doing that. That was just unnatural for me. So these people saved my life. So if I can go with 160, 170, we also had about 30 to 40 college students that were in and out constantly, so I believe that you're going to see a real mushroom effect here more than you're seeing because of who you are. Let's talk about Taylor. And what was it like for you? What kind of help was it for you for her being a child that grew up in full-time ministry?
Sure. Yeah. So, Taylor grew up in full-time ministry. I mean, her dad was a pastor for her entire life. That's all she knew was ministry. So what's hilarious about that is she always told her parents her entire life, I will never marry a guy that's in ministry. I always joke with her because she wasn't specific enough. She said, I'll never marry a pastor, meaning a senior pastor. She got a youth pastor, which is more fun, right? And so,
at least more fun, right?
Yes. So that's what, she never planned it. She didn't want it, but that's what God orchestrated. And so I think for me, the good thing is that my wife, growing up in ministry, tends to be protective, but in a good way. So she knows when, I need to shut down for a little while. She knows when to say, hey, you don't need to listen to that, or you don't need to listen to this. And so she's just super protective, which can be a good thing, but can also be, could also get you into some trouble sometimes.
I have one of those wives that she was not in full-time ministry, the farthest thing from it. But God puts those people in our lives because we will drive ourselves to an early grave. Yes. We will push ourselves. I mean, I'm guessing the disciples were natural martyrs. They're going, we're just going to keep going,
Right.
After Jesus left, after the Holy Spirit. Before that, they were kind of slackers. But anyway,
That's it.
But exactly. Great, deal because, and the hardest thing is for us to listen to them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Have you had that conflict?
Always. I am one who, like I'm sure I would think probably most youth pastors are, is I can't turn my mind off. So even sometimes when I'm home, I'm with the kids and I'm engaged, but my mind is still spinning on, oh my goodness, like so-and-so still missing their paperwork. I was supposed to send a birthday card to this kid. We didn't do this. Holy cow, I've got to get all these things done before August. There's not enough time. And so she's really good at just telling me like, you've just got to stop, just turn it off for a little bit, And so she's good at doing that as far as just trying to keep me in check. So we always joke that every couple of weeks, she's got to have that moment where she's a little rude, but it's because it's needed. And she's like, you've got to quit because if you don't, you're going to drive yourself nuts and you're going to get sick or you're going to do something,
Exactly. And so and I did all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens easier than you would think.
Yeah. There was a time I was getting ready for a mission trip to Guatemala. I know that you guys are, is it Guatemala or Dominican you guys are doing?
Well, our church has a Dominican trip, yeah.
Right. And I did 5 trips in a row, 6 in a row, 1 a year with Guatemala. And so it was before I really understood nutrition stuff. My doctor had to give me, I was on the couch. I said, Doc, I'm leaving tomorrow. He's also from our church. And I said, I'm leaving tomorrow. I cannot move. I cannot get off my couch. I am so sick. I'm so tired and sick. Right. He says, well, you're going to have to. You've got to get to my office. And I got there and he shot me. And I said, whoa, this is awesome.
Right.
How many times can I have this? He says, well, not many unless you want to have a heart attack. So he gave me a steroid shot to
jumpstart me. You don't want that to happen.
No,
and that was before my wife or I either one understood. So let's keep talking about that a little bit. And as an organizer, I've heard certain things. This is going to help other people. We're going to, as an organizer, you feel like you have to send the card out. You have to do this over here. And because you can.
Right.
But what your challenge is going to be is because you can, you're going to have to learn how to get other people to do things that they can do for you. And you talked about that with students. So we're going to jump off Taylor for a minute. I'm ADD. I can do whatever I want. And so let's jump into how you delegate students to do stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm a really big proponent, and this is what we're really pushing for here at First Baptist Umatilla is we don't want to do student ministry to students. I've had enough years where we've done ministry to students. And so I've really bought into, we want to do ministry with students.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means, hey, announcements didn't go as good as I wish they would have. You know what? That game probably could have went a little better, or this could have looked a little neater or cleaner, had a little bit better bow on it. But what we've learned to do is, man, if kids are gifted and are able and capable to carry something out, turn it over to them. Because what we're finding is that it may not have been as well as we thought, and it may not have been as pretty as we wanted. But what we find is that it helps the kids connect better because it's their own peers who are doing the ones, who are leading. We try in every avenue where we can, we try to have students serving and doing the things that they can do. And we don't by any means have that perfected, but we're constantly changing and growing and trying to push more and more students out front and letting them lead.
The one thing that I hear that you're saying is it's okay to fail some.
Absolutely. I think failure is a great thing. I don't think I'd be in, where I am in youth ministry today if it weren't for failures in the past. If you decide to learn from them, it's always good to fail. And I think if we can give teenagers an atmosphere where they can fail now in middle school or in high school, it does better to help them, to further themselves as they go on in life, because they're going to fail in college, or they're going to fail in their first job, or they're going to fail sometimes as a mother or as a father. So failure is healthy. For us as youth pastors, we have to learn from those failures and move forward.
And John Maxwell, a lot of people have heard Dr. John Maxwell, but he says, it's not whether or not you fail, it's how fast you get up.
Sure.
So the question is, how fast can you get up? And how fast do you get up? Do you find yourself getting up quickly?
I'm always quick to respond, I think in a healthy way, not in you just overreacted way too quick. But I'm always quick to, especially if it's a student or if it's a worker who, they tried something they were really psyched on, or, they thought this would work and it didn't. Really just to be an encourager to them, because they need to know, one, like we said, it's okay to fail, but two, where can you go from here? Hey, this way that you tried it didn't work, but what happens if you try it this way? Or, there's always next week. Just because you failed today doesn't mean you're going to fail every Wednesday for the rest of the time you're a youth worker or that you're in student ministry. And so that's how for others, when I see them fail, I try to just jump and help in whatever way possible. For me, I've gotten to the point in student ministry, I guess, after you've been doing it for a few years, where it's just like, failure is part of it, and it's okay to know, like, hey, if it didn't work, guess what? We never have to do it again. We never have to try it again. We never have to revisit it. We can just, hey, it's on the back burner of student ministry. It's gone, right? And so we just look forward to, well, that didn't work, but what's something that we can do that will work? We don't want to get into a rhythm where we just keep doing the same thing just for the same thing's sake. I mean, all right, we failed. It didn't work. What can we do to maximize what we are doing or do differently? And so I think I'm quick to get back up. I mean, I don't beat myself up over, well, you know what, that game was a flop, or holy cow, that message last night did not connect at all. You just get up, dust it off, and do better the next week. You just keep moving.
Hey, and when students have bought into you and parents, and because it's a combo effect. By the way, if you're a youth pastor, you're really a pastor to students and families.
Correct.
I mean, there's not just one thing. There's the entire family. And the entire family is engaged because most people are frantic for their adolescents.
Yes.
They're students, because it's the hardest time. And the student's transitional life is the hardest time in a parental transitional life. And so you got grandparents down going, I'm praying for my kid. Will you help me? Right. And they're wanting you to kind of be that person that changes their kid.
Yes, because that's possible, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And what do you say to parents when they go, we really need you. We're going to get them there every week, and you see desperation in those parents' eyes. What has been one of your best and worst cases with parents?
Yeah, and that's a good question, but it's also a hard question. I think a lot of us hopefully try to pride ourselves on having a thick skin and a soft heart. I think that's kind of the key to ministry. But I think for me, it hasn't ever been one super specific moment. I can kind of think of two that I'm drawing from. One was we were getting ready to make a transition in our ministry as far as we were going to be splitting middle school and high school. We felt like it was the right time to do it. It was one of those moments where it's like, hey, we may fail, but we have to try, right? Because if we don't, we'll never know. And I mean, this had been communicated for 3+ months. I mean, every avenue you can imagine, it was out there. And then we get to like the week before it's getting ready to be the split, and middle schoolers are staying on Wednesday and high schoolers are going to Sunday. And man, like, did I ever get Facebook attacked like it was, their job. And, I remember there was about 3 or 4 parents who just really were like ripping into me. And so I think when you get to a moment like that, you're like, man, well, I didn't realize how you really felt about me. This kind of lets me know. That was a pretty rough day, just because I was like, wow, all right, well, that's kind of crazy. And then I had another day in ministry where I remember a lot of these things tend to happen on a Wednesday. So, if youth workers, if you guys haven't seen that pattern, I mean, Satan will do whatever he can to derail the things God wants to do in and through you. So a lot of these attacks kind of happen on Wednesday. So I remember I had a Wednesday one time, and I won't say where it was just in case, but, again, it was just a couple parents who just, for whatever reason, just felt that was the day necessary to kind of come at me sideways a little bit. And really, it just kind of hurt, just the things that were said. It was people who, you thought felt one way about you and who you trusted, and whether it was just a bad day for them or whatever it was. But man, I just remember sitting in my pastor's car and I'm like, man, like, am I even supposed to be doing ministry here anymore? Like, should I resign tonight? Like, should this be happening? Not really truly anything from my own doing. It truly was just, being brought from the other side. And so those were some rough days in ministry for me, for sure.
We were just talking about worst ministry moments, and a couple things that you said were that parents may be just having a what?
Yeah, they may just be having a bad day, you know.
When they're chewing you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe absolutely nothing you did. It could just be that they don't have it all quite figured out that day, or things haven't quite gone right, and you're the one they take it out on.
That's right. That's right. And students the same way. We're talking about students that are just in.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes some of our students who we have on Wednesday nights who it's like, holy cow, would they please quit doing Fortnite dances? Or how many times do we have to ask them to quit talking during the message? Or, how disruptive can you really be in a small group? Yeah, I mean, and I just think that a lot of those kids who are those constant rollover discipline, like every week, a lot of times they sometimes come from the toughest home situation. Or maybe it's not tough. Maybe they just aren't getting what they need. Maybe they're not feeling loved at home. Maybe they get no attention. Maybe they whatever, and that tends to be the case a lot of times that I've seen over the years in student ministry. And so, sometimes they're just having a bad day because, they haven't heard their dad tell them they love them in 3 years, and it hit them hard that Wednesday, you just never know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, so best moment
in ministry?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of really great moments. Obviously, we would like to be super spiritual and say, man, every time a kid prays to receive Christ, that's the best moment. I think for me, and this is just so silly, really, but I think for me, some of my best moments are when we go to these bigger camps or bigger retreats or bigger conferences and things like that, seeing the way that the kids interact with what the Lord's doing in the room that weekend or that week. Like, we just came back from the Lift Tour, and just seeing our kids, I mean, they go for it in worship on Wednesday nights here anyways in our different avenues, but just seeing them really just go for it and just really lifting some praise to the Lord is always a great moment for me. Another really it sounds weird that this is a high moment or a great moment for me in ministry, but like I said, we could talk about all the spiritual things, man. Every baptism I've ever done is the best moment, or every salvation. Those are. But there's some that stand out. And that's what we're talking about. So, I mean, I guess if we talk about a highlight moment, I know one for me that I look back to is we had gone to the Lift Tour a couple years ago, and we had this girl in our student ministry who had just kind of started coming around, didn't know Christ. We had conversations about him, but just didn't know him. Just came from a home where she had some trust issues and some different things. And so her thing that was stopping her from following Jesus is, well, how do I know I can trust him? Well, how do I know that he's going to do what he says he's going to do? So it's just that trust issue that was holding her back. So I remember, night one, we're there at the conference. They do a time of invitation, and she just jumps up. She's ready, and I was like, wow, this is great. And so we go back to a room there that they provide for us with a bunch of other students and youth pastors and youth workers. And she's like, I need to pray to receive Christ. And so she did, and she came to know the Lord, and she followed through with baptism. And so I say that to say that there came a moment where we left that church a while later, and just the note that my wife and I received from her, I think, is really, yes, the salvation, yes, the baptism, yes, the seeing her grow in the Lord, but just the way that she was like, I don't think you understand like how much the Lord has used you in my life. Like, I was a different person 2 years ago. I didn't, I was just, all the things that she said in the note was like, holy cow. And so I think for us as youth pastors, sometimes we don't get to always see the impact that we make, especially if different things are happening in life. And so, we don't always get to see the results, or we don't always get to hear the results of the investment that we make. And so I think for me, that was a highlight, just getting to hear from her, holy cow, like, thank you, Lord, you used me in this way. Like, this girl's life is never going to be the same, yes, because of you, Jesus, but like, you allowed me to be a part of that. And so how cool is that was able to happen?
Yeah. And how long after you were with her did you receive that note?
Let's see. It would have been like maybe a year. So
a year later. And how long were you in student ministry at that time when you got that letter?
We were approaching 8 years in student ministry. Yeah.
Well, the average is 5. And I was told that with Youth for Christ when we first came in our training. They said, you won't hear about the results of your ministry for 5 years. Wow. And I had the privilege of being in a place in South Lake and Orlando for 6 years, 5.5 there, 6 for 6 months. They put me everywhere. And I got a phone call from this kid who had been gone for a couple of years. And he said, just want to let you know, I asked Jesus in my heart this year. Wow. And I heard you every time you talked about it. And you were the catalyst to get me to that point. Wow. But I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And so, and it was 5 years. I'm like, oh my goodness, these guys are right. It's 5 years.
Yeah.
And for you, it was 8. Sure. But if you're not in ministry for a long enough period of time, especially at one place, you weren't necessarily in that place for 8 years. You were different places. Right. But let's talk about that now. Sure. Because we talked about when you came here, I gave you a call. I don't know if I texted you or called you. I think we did both. You talked about, man, I really didn't want to leave this place. I was only there, was it 18 months?
Yeah. The last church I was at,
that's how long the average youth pastor lasts. Right. And your words were what?
I did not want to be the guy who was only at a place for 18 months. Almost turned down any even inclination of coming to Umatilla because I did not want to be the youth pastor that was a statistic and that was only somewhere for 18 months and they moved on for greener pastures or whatever you would want to throw at it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. Absolutely. But
what was the deciding factor? What happened that you knew? What were some of those things that happened that you knew this is the place you need to go?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, it really just came down to we believed that it was what God was telling us to do. We believed that some doors were closing where we were. We believed that lots of doors were opening here for us at Umatilla. Doors that we didn't knock on, like doors that we didn't go looking for. None of this was what we wanted by any stretch of the imagination. So for us, it really came down to we felt like this is what God was telling us to do. So we had to decide, are we going to be obedient to what we truly believe God is saying? Or are we going to say no and just kind of do what we want to do because we think we're comfortable? So the whole thing surrounding, deciding to move, I mean, we had bought a house. So we hadn't even owned it for a year, which is crazy to think about trying to sell a house. We literally sold the house within 13 months of the time that we bought it to the time the contracts were signed, sold, whole deal, done, 13 months. But even that was part of God's plan. We never would have bought that house. I never would have bought that house if I had thought there was any chance I was going to be moving a year from then. Right. That was something I never wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But God even used that to allow us to somehow make money. The market went up within that year and somehow make money after owning a house for a year, which then helped us to be able to purchase a home, when we came over here. We had a great student ministry there. I mean, we were running a solid, 60 to 70 students, a lot who were just passionate about their walk with Christ. Kids were coming to know Jesus like I'd never seen in my ministry before. Yeah. I think I'd have done led more kids to Christ and done more baptisms probably in that 18 months than I have in some of my other spots where the Lord had me, which is crazy. So yeah, it was just wild. You know, we didn't call for the job. We didn't send a resume hoping we'd hear something back. None of that was the case. It really was just all God orchestrated. And truly it came down to obedience. What are you going to do? You know, I've got you this far.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to try to do it on your own now? Or are you going to continue to listen to me?
Well, and you got that theme in your life. You know, your dad wasn't sold on what you were going to do in the vocational change, but you could not.
Sure.
And then here you are in a place that ministry accelerated.
Yeah.
Like God was going, okay, we're going to get it done, but you're going to get out of here because I got another place that you need to be. You know, how many times did we see that happen to the apostles? And most of the time, a lot of times they didn't want to go. I love people talk about Acts and they go, oh, if we were only the church just like Acts. I'm going, they killed them. What are you talking about?
Right.
That was a hard time in the growth of the church. And so we are about the acts that are in Acts.
Right.
But there was a lot of suffering and there was a lot of migration because God was putting people and spreading them out against their will, in some cases by government doing it, so that the gospel could get spread. And so there are going to be moments. I mean, our gig is let's try to keep youth pastors from moving so much because you don't see the results of a ministry on the average for 5 years. You don't see a real development and stronghold in the community for almost 10 years, and on it goes. But there's also a time when God's telling you to move. You better not stay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the culture that I think all student pastors want to break is, you know, I don't think you want to go and just be somewhere a short time and then head out. You know, I think I would just, as a youth pastor, encouraging others, just make sure that you are truly prayerfully seeking God on if you should go to a place or not, if you should say yes or not, and ask the tough questions in the interview process. You know, if you guys are in that state, you know, ask. You know, don't be afraid to ask something and then you find out 6 months later it's in complete disagreement with what you may believe or how you may practice certain things or how you would even conduct yourself in ministry. And so I think we could probably save a lot of pain and heartache if we are don't get so caught up in the romantic side of getting a job and we say, hey, you know, we need to have some hard conversations before we get to this point. I think it would change a lot.
Well, it would, and hard conversations are important. And when we're young in student ministry or any ministry, and I did this, I let people take advantage of me. I didn't know it. I didn't know my value. And so I was poor for a long time. And I came from an entrepreneurial business family. My dad started working at 9 because his dad died when he was 6 and built his mom's first house at 12 and became a contractor. And so he tried to do right things with me and different things like that. But there are tough times that are going to come around to where you're just going to have to do certain things, and it's not going to be the way you thought it was going to be.
Right.
But you've got to know your value.
Yeah.
And I tell youth pastors this all the time. I tell people in service areas, not just youth pastors, you'll never get paid what you're worth.
Right.
But make sure you're getting paid what they can. And I'm going to tell you this, for you and for all youth pastors, youth workers out there, and service people, but especially we're looking at youth pastors. There's a book that it's not a Christian book, so there's going to be some language in it, but I highly recommend it anyway. And that is a guy by the name of Chris Voss, and it's called Never Split the Difference. He was the guy that changed the face of how the FBI did negotiations. Oh, wow. And he had no idea what he was doing in the beginning. And they said, no, you're not going to do negotiations. You ever done it before? Well, no. You know, I need to change up what I'm doing here. And no, get out of my office. That's what the lady said to him, who was in charge of New York. She said, if you want to come back here and do this, you go work for the suicide hotline over here. He did it. And he found out he was a lousy negotiator and came back after he'd done it for about a year or whatever. And she says, I tell everybody that wants to do this to do that job, and almost nobody does. My next hire is you. And so what he says is when you, and we do this in ministry all the time, we split the difference. Okay, well, let's see what we can kind of agree on our financial end. Here's a phrase that probably will be controversial, But I've come to this realization just in this past year. You want to follow God, follow the money. Now, that sounds really crazy. But you talked about doors opening and closing. If you can't pay your bills, that's one thing for God to say, you just go, I'll provide. There's a phrase that Jay Strack reminded me of. Doug Fields says it, many other people, and that is, where there's vision, God has provision. Where God wants you, He's going to provide. No, I know guys that are starving. I know guys that got their electricity cut off. They got their phone cut off. I was one of those guys, at one point in early ministry because I didn't know my worth. And so it is important that we go into a place and go, are they just trying to take advantage of me and they don't really care who they have? They're really not about ministry. God's led me here. Okay, it's time for us to educate them. So go strong. And here's why I said about never split the difference. He said, your wife wants you to wear a brown shoe and you want to wear a black shoe. So why don't you just split the difference? Wear one brown and one black. Who's happy?
Neither one.
Nobody's happy.
Right.
But he said, we did that negotiation. We're going, if we split the difference on the fee of this guy, he's kidnapped this person, we're going to get what we want and they're going to be okay with it. And the answer is no. Nobody's happy. And you may get somebody killed. So in student ministry, the people that may be getting killed are your family. Because we see families of youth pastors fall apart because of pressure and lack of funds. And we see churches fall apart because of lack of funds. Youth ministries fall. So go ahead. Tell us more about, when you came here, tell us about what they did financially. How did you know financially it was a good move? Or did you know?
Yeah, sure. That was financially, we're kind of late in the game talking finances, which was okay.
Which is not bad either.
No, it's not bad. I think it's always good when you don't talk about that too early on, and I think I've always been taught, like, as the candidate, you don't ask that too early, but you also don't wait until the very last second.
In business, they do that too. They said the person who talks about money first loses.
Sure. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. So, we kind of, like at other places I've been, just a standard, hey, here's what we can do for a package. And then, if something in that doesn't work for you, then let us know and we'll see kind of what we can do. And I just kind of already knew some stuff from conversations. And so I knew that where I would be at financially was competitive. And as far as when you actually look at all the package stuff that's added to, some of those salaries, and you're like, well, the base may or may not be exactly where I thought it was. But then when you start to couple in these other things, it really kind of kicks in. And so I think that's a good thing for youth workers to know is don't always get so caught up in what the base salary might be. If you're talking to a church and you're like, oh, well, that's, I was making this much here and I really thought I'd take a good jump because it's this size or that or whatever. Wait to find out what everything is included, because sometimes it's like, hey, here's the base. We can get either really excited or we could get really upset, because every church does it different too, and every denomination is different. And that's important to know depending on which denomination you fall in. You may have a super high base salary and you're like, man, this is killer. Like this, I can't wait to see what else is with this. And you find out, well, that's it. You got to figure out health insurance on your own, and you've got to figure out all these other pieces to the puzzle. Whereas some other denominations, it's like, hey, here's your base. And, it's good, it's decent. And then, but you also get, health insurance and a cell phone and this, that, and the other that couple along with it.
Those are big things.
I think it's always smart to, yes, you need to make sure you pay your bills. Obviously, you're called to take care of your family. But, don't get so hung up in, well, I thought I was making this move. I should be making the big bucks now, or, and don't sell yourself short. I mean, if you're working in a smaller church too, don't say, well, it's a smaller church, so I should only, they're offering me this much, but that seems like a lot for a church that size. You got to understand, none of us are ever, well, you just told me, Doug, you're never going to get what you are valued at. But none of us are ever going to get paid the amount of money for hours that we're putting in. I mean, we're going to get nowhere close. There's a reason why youth pastors aren't hourly workers, because there's no way.
They couldn't pay us. They couldn't afford us.
Yeah, there's no way. We'd all be making $150K a year plus. And
and that's what we want churches to be educated about and know is if you were to pay us by the hour, you could not afford us.
Really, for me, it all comes back to, part-time youth pastor John Dotson. I was friends with his son Trent in high school, And really, we kind of started doing this in 8th grade, but I was not even attending a church regularly. I was not attending youth regularly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd pop over at Trinity every once in a while with Joe South and hang out with you guys. I would go over to what was First Baptist Eustis, is now Life Point from time to time, and never just connected. And so I just wasn't going anywhere. And so I remember my friend Trent started inviting me to go to his youth group. His dad was the youth pastor, and for me at that time, all I really needed to know was there's basketball, there's pizza, and there's girls, right? I mean, that's what I needed to know. That's what got me in the door, and that's why I love that today. Like, I don't care why teenagers come in the door. I don't care if you're here because the girls here, because we do this fun thing. You're going to have to hear about Jesus, and eventually that's what's going to capture your heart. And so for me, it was just that, just John Dotson just would pick me up if I needed him to, would take me home. But more than that, we had a relationship. I mean, we truly built a good relationship. I mean, 4 or 5 of us would all come over to the house on the weekends and stay the weekend with them. We'd play basketball, and he was the super cool dad who could just beat 5 of us at basketball against just him. I just remember him just constantly pouring just into my life, just constantly pointing me towards Jesus, which is what we're called to do. And so that was the biggest influence for me. Started in 8th grade and then just all the way through high school. I would say always be yourself. I feel like that's so important in student ministry. I believe comparison is the thief of all joy. So don't worry about what the guy down the street from you is doing or what he's better at than you are. I would say find your lane and stay in it. So however God created you, however he gifted you, whatever, find it and go for it. We talked earlier, I'm an organizer. I had a conversation with one of my friends and a guy I consider a mentor the other day. And we were talking about that. And he's like, administration, organization is your skill. Every youth pastor wants to hear, well, he's the best communicator in the world, or he plans the best events, or does this or does that. And you may be one of those things, but whatever it is, that's your skill set. That's what you were created to do. Run with it. And your ministry will be thankful for it, And so I would say, for sure, just be yourself. Don't try to take on the identity of somebody else, because then you're not being real or authentic. And I don't think that you can truly reach teenagers that way if you're not really being yourself. Community is important in no matter what way, shape, or form you find it. And so I think that when, youth pastors can work together, and you can't work together on everything, but when you can work together on specific things, I think it's huge. I think it's so important for the community to see. I think it's important for the kids in your own church to see. I think it's important for your church members to see. We have too many places who are like, well, we can't work with them. Well, why not? Well, I'm scared that our kids are going to start going to church there because they're going to like that guy better, or they're going to like their programming better, or their building's cooler than ours. And that's really not what we need to worry about. Ultimately, as long as they're going somewhere, who cares? And sure, there probably needs to be some youth pastors who need to pump the brakes and be like, hey, don't try to steal other people's kids. I get that as well. I think, for me, it's security as a leader, and that like, I'm not self-conscious to the fact where I'm worried about what somebody else is doing. Hey, so-and-so over there is killing it. Praise God, man. Keep building the kingdom. Go for it. And I don't care if their student ministry is better than mine or flashier or better looking than mine. I want to work together with guys. But also, too, I'm starting to find out and realize, Doug, that, I'm getting ready, like we said, to creep into that 10th year of ministry. And so I'm starting to find that I'm getting on the older side of student ministry, even though I'm not old at all. I'm only 32. But I'm getting to the point where people realize, hey, he's been doing this for a while. And so he's probably seen some things and knows a few things. And so part of the reason I do that is because I love investing in other youth pastors who may not necessarily be a lot younger than me, but maybe are younger just in ministry than me. And so I think it's valuable that, look, none of us are perfect. None of us know it all. I'm certainly not a genius when it comes to student ministry. I fail all the time. I'm still figuring it out. But if I can share something that I've learned, or some knowledge, or somewhere that I've failed, or just anything big or small with somebody else in ministry and help them be successful, why would I not do that? You know what I mean? Why would I not take the time to help them be as successful as possible? For me, as far as resources, I'm a reader. And so I believe that leaders are readers. And if you're not reading, you're not leading. Reading's huge for me. I try to do a good variety of books. So I'll read anything from just your general, what am I reading right now? Bob Goff, Love Does. Okay. So I'm a couple years late on it, but hey, I'm reading Love Does right now. It's a great book. So I'll read things, kind of in that range, but then I'll also read things that are in the business world, business leadership. So I'll read things like The E-Myth Revisited is a great book. or just all different kinds of things. So reading is massively important to me and to my development as far as just resourcing me. We don't always have a ton of time to read, but I just try to give 30 minutes a night. I'll just be laying in bed, just try to read. Generally is a chapter or so a day. So you can read a book a month, and so that's massive. It's better than 0 books a month. So yeah. And and you hit on a couple other things. When you talk about audio/video, podcasts are a big thing as well. If you're a church leader, there's a lot of really good ones. Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast is mega for anybody. But if you can start doing that now as a youth worker, it's going to help you be a better leader to your team, which then creates better ministry opportunities for you. And so that one's always a huge one for me. Then there's tons of just different podcasts you can listen to. I kind of stick towards just, his for the most part. And then listening to sermons, not so that you can take notes on, how you can preach this better or that better or steal their sermons. But I think there's something to be said that if you're listening to the word of God being preached more than just on Sunday morning, that infiltrates your heart and it begins to, be on the pages of what you say and what you do. And so I think just constantly being bathed in God's word that way is a healthy thing for, a youth pastor to do. So I try to do that a lot too, especially if I'm just working in the office, if I'm doing some administrative stuff, just you don't have to watch it, but listen to it, as you're going is big. You mentioned conferences. Love going to conferences. It's not always doable because you're missing days in the office and it does make your week harder sometimes. But for me, Youth Pastor Summit is always a highlight of my year. Love going there and hearing some great speakers on those Mondays that they do. But then also on the Tuesday, the In the Trenches kind of training where you can pick kind of your breakout classes and get a little more in depth on a specific subject, I think is great for youth workers as well.
If there's a trip you could take anywhere in the world, where would you go?
So it's funny you bring that up. My wife and I try to go on a cruise every January and we leave the kids at home. So it's kind of right before the real busy stretch starts, getting into that spring and moving into summer. I think if I could do, if we were to go tomorrow, we can go anywhere we want, no amount of money, matters, anything like that. I would probably take my wife over to Europe and just explore, London, Paris, just go do just all of it. Because neither one of us have ever been. I know it's somewhere she really desires to go. I wouldn't mind going, I think for me, it would be more of taking her kind of on that experience of seeing some of that. And just with her family ties, her mom was born actually over there. Her father was in, the military. And so just some different things like that, I think would just be cool to take her over there to see some of that and just experience what life is like over there, And so I think that's probably what I would do is just take her and say, hey, we've got 2 weeks in Europe. Where do you want to go? And whatever country over there, wherever we may find ourselves. I think that's what I would do.
What's one thing you wish people knew about you that they don't know?
One thing I wish they knew about me that they don't know. Holy cow. Nothing really major. I think a lot of people don't know. One, I've been to Hawaii before, which was a really cool experience. But they're always surprised to find out that when I was there was when the earthquake happened in Japan. And so they literally thought we were going to get wiped off the face of the earth. They thought I was working at Liberty Baptist Church at the time and taught in the school. And they literally were coming over the intercoms at the school saying, pray for Pastor Chase. We literally thought we were going to be dead. So they thought a huge tsunami was going to come and wipe out Hawaii. And so, well, when we first found out, we really didn't know that it truly was happening. So we were walking the streets trying to buy our last couple souvenirs. It was our last night we were there. We heard a guy, he had this massive telescope set up on the street, and he's telling these little kids, he's like, hey, do you see the way that the stars are aligned? And we're like, what is this guy saying? And he's like, yeah, that's how we know a tsunami is coming tonight. Man, what? I was mad. I was like, what is he telling this kid? And so we get our last couple souvenirs, and almost every hotel in Hawaii has a little convenient grocery store at the bottom of the hotel. So we go in because, again, it's our last night. So I'm trying to get one more bottle of pineapple juice, which is amazing, by the way, over there. And just some water and stuff from the hotel room. And we get in there and the line is out the door into the street. We're like, man, what is happening? And everyone's buying water and bread and all this stuff. And so come to find out that this earthquake had happened in Japan and could be a massive tsunami that's going to take out Hawaii. And so at that point, we're like, holy cow. So we start kind of going into survival mode of, okay, well, we're on this floor of the hotel. So the chances that the wave's going to hit us are not, good because of how high we were. But we were only 2 blocks off the actual beach. So we were close. We could see the water from where we were. And so we just kind of got up in our hotel and got on our balcony, and it was a little scary. I mean, they had the police driving around, and they'd stop at every intersection, lights and sirens, and, said something like, attention, attention, due to potential tsunami, everybody has to clear the streets, go back to your, home or hotel or whatever, like now. And I'll tell you what was really scary is no cell phone service, because everybody instantly is calling and texting and emailing. You couldn't get in contact with anybody. I have a friend on the island who she teaches and does some different things there on the islands. And we could not get in contact with her because she was calling, do you want to come to my apartment? And, what do we need to do? It was a little scary there for a little while, and we're flying out the next day. So we're thinking like, okay, if we get stuck in this hotel for a week or so, like, first of all, if you're stuck in Hawaii, is that really the worst place you could be stuck? So we're just trying to figure out like, what are we going to do? Like we are, 5,000 miles away from Florida, we're so far away. And so we just kind of sat up and waited and waited and waited. The scariest part of the whole thing was there's a place in Hawaii on Oahu, the main island where we were, where there's a place called Diamond Head. That's a hiking spot, but there's Diamond Head Beach. They have a camera set up on Diamond Head showing the beach, and the news reporters are talking and going, and they're saying, hey, the first sign that a tsunami is going to hit is if the water sucks out away from the shore. All right, well, there's still water there, so we're good, right? So they cut back to a reporter with his microphone, and he's talking, and then instantly they're like, go back to the beach, go back to the beach. And they go back, and all the water is gone from Diamond Head. I mean, you can see rocks and everything for as far as you can see. There's no water in sight. And we were like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. Like, this is real. Like, this is going to happen. Like, we're about to get hit with a tsunami. We don't know how big or how far inland it's going to go. The hotels, the electrical is on the bottom of the hotel to control the top. So we're like, this is going to be a bad situation. So they keep it there, and they're talking, and they're like, okay, like we're just waiting at this point, like morbidly waiting for this wave to come in and hit us all. And then I just remember the relief of seeing the water just slowly trickle back in. And so it's almost like it wanted to do it, and then it didn't, And so that was kind of that experience of fear of, we weren't too nervous until we saw that water go out. And then at that point we were like, all right, this could be bad. This could be meaning we're stuck here for a while, or, hey, we are maybe going to meet Jesus tonight. And so that was rough. But then the next day, having to get up and fly out after we had stayed up. Hawaii's 5 hours behind Florida. So we stayed up till 3 a.m. Hawaii time to find out if we were going to die or not. So then, that's 8 a.m. in Florida. And so it made for a long flight back all the way from Hawaii to LA, from LA to Miami, and then Miami to Orlando. So
oh my goodness,
it was a long one, but yeah, so a cool experience, a little scary there for a little while, but yeah.
No, that is an amazing story. What are you talking about?
I know.
And so tell me, what was the most beautiful thing there that you saw that you just,
oh man,
you guys went, I mean, I heard it's just amazing.
So I think one of the coolest things about Hawaii, first of all, we did way too many cool things. I mean, we cage dove with sharks. That's always been a dream of mine. Yeah. So we cage dove with sharks. So that was really cool. Great whites is hopefully next, in a cage, of course. But I think the coolest thing about Hawaii,
I don't know. Go ahead.
I think the coolest thing about Hawaii is that you can be standing on the balcony of your house, of your hotel, of wherever, and you can look to one side and there's beautiful beaches. I mean, just out of control beaches. But then you can look to the other side and it's rainforest mountains for as far as you can see. And so I think that's one of the most beautiful things to me.
Listen, man, this has been an amazing interview.
Sure.
I can't wait for people to hear the episode.
Yeah, been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and but especially the ending.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because people are going to know something about you that they had no clue about.
Yeah.
Listen, Chase, we appreciate it. Youth Worker on Fire appreciates it, and Youth Worker Nation. A lot of people are going to be helped somewhere in life. Maybe next week, it may be 5 years from now.
Right.
But they're going to hear this, and they're going to then know some great things that God's been doing in your life.
Cool.
That helps them.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.